Well, as you can tell by the noise and the view, we are standing in our greenhouse courtyard. So for those of you that have known us for the last 8 years, we have, over the last 7 years, the first 7 actually, the door behind me was the main entrance to the greenhouse and to the garden center. And this courtyard used to be full of hanging baskets and retail product. Over the last year and a half since we built, we've got the new building that is to my left, your right. The entrance is moved. So entrance is shuffled off to the right-hand side of the parking lot. And now we're that far away from being done our courtyard transformation. So come on in and let's do a little bit of a tour. One of the things you're going to see is we've actually put a fence around the courtyard. So this is something our landscape team has designed between Dave and Liam. They figured out a design that worked. So we actually started with page wire. That's what you're seeing in the middle. And we wanted to use that because it's relatively open, it's relatively transparent. And when we think about the rural environment that we're in here, it matches that quite nicely. The awesome part is for us, this fence didn't need to be really, really tall. So we were able to keep it at just over 4 feet. The really awesome part, and what you can't tell right now, is that all of these panels are removable. So in the wintertime, if we need to plow this with the machine, we pop the panels out of the way and we put them back in the spring.
Let me just check here. Looks like some big tools. I'm just gonna come around, like, what are these panels? These look pretty good. Hey Liam, what are you
going?
Good, what are you doing?
Well, we're building a fence.
I've never seen a fence like that before. Where did it come from?
Well, believe it or not, the landscaping team and we built it.
Liam's a really awesome person on our landscape team, and he designed these. You know, Dave came to him and said, hey, you know, this is what I'm thinking, and Liam built these from scratch.
We had to hollow out the inside of these 4x4s so that we're gonna sink a little 1-inch post in the ground and then slide the 4x4 on top.
Oh, that's
gonna allow
great.
us to move this somewhere else if we need to. It's not stuck in the ground.
Oh, that's amazing, right?
Yeah.
So that's awesome. Thank you so much, Liam. I really appreciate it.
Awesome.
So as we work through the courtyard, we tried to put in a few different things that you might see at home. So we've got a couple of troughs. So these troughs are our vegetable troughs. So in this, we've got a mix of, we've got some herbs planted, we've got some vegetables. I know we've got tomato. I love corn, always wanted to do corn, and quite frankly, I wanted to see how it works. So there's a few things in our troughs and in our gardens that are just trials, because gardening should be fun. And what the hey, let's see if we can find out some answers together. So we'll report back on that as we go. The other thing we wanted to do with this courtyard is get in a sense of height. Because one of the things, as we know, is the greenhouse is really, really tall. We're 16 feet to the underside of the gutters, which puts us at 22 feet to the peak. That's a really big, flat wall. Basically, it's equivalent to about a story and a half for a house. And we've put in a few different trees, shorter growing trees, like this ivory silk lilac. And there is, on my other side, we'll take a look at the native serviceberry. We've added those to give us a sense of scale. And we've also added those to give us a sense of color. When we look at the planting in here, and come on back, we're going to take a closer look. When we do planting design, we always want to plant in ones for specimens. So that's our thriller. That's the oh my gosh statement piece. And then our fillers are going to be in odd numbers, 3s, 5s, 7s, and 9s. And that is what the designer in me will say. That's what our landscape architect, Jess and Kate, will say. This courtyard's a little bit different. As I said, we want to trial a few things, and our goal here in this courtyard was to plant a few different things, so over the next few years you could actually see what they look like, and then go back to our shrub and our perennial yard and purchase them. So sometimes design rules are made to be broken, and this is one of those times. When you do look at the planting though, one of the big rules that we firmly believe in is 30%, a minimum of 30% of your plant choices need to be evergreen or grasses, because that's going to give you something up from November to March, right? So you got to remember beautiful, beautiful perennials, love them to death, but perennials are ultimately going to be flat. So things like hostas, coneflowers, daylilies, all of that dies flat to the ground. So we need something that's got some oomph and some staying power. So you are going to see a few things like the creeping junipers in here. You're also going to see a ton of ornamental grasses as well, right? So when we look at these grasses here, this is a variety called a feather reed grass. This is a cool season grass. Why is that important? Because right now we are shooting this at the end of June and it's in flower. So when we plant ornamental grasses, we want to plant a combination of cool season grasses, so things that are going to flower in June and early July, like the feather reed grass. And we also want a combination of the warm season grasses, things like the, on the other side there, we're going to take a peek at those. We'll get there, we'll get there. But things like the panicums, the switch grasses, and the northern seos, those are all warm season grasses, which means they flower later in the season. So that's also super important. As we work through the garden, we've got some interest for pollinators. So these little orange guys here are swamp milkweed. That's the Slepius, so it's fantastic for monarchs. And then as we work the corners, there's a few different hydrangeas. So we've got some macrophyllus. So hydrangea macrophylla are the ones that have the ball-shaped flowers. And the paniculatas, wow, say that 9 times fast, are the ones with the cone-shaped flowers. So again, we want to get a variety of different things in space so you can see what they would do in your yard. There's some Weigelias. That's these 3. Weigelias are fantastic for hummingbirds and butterflies. Now they've just finished flowering, but that's okay because they're going to produce another set of flowers in about 2 to 3 weeks. We've got some spireas in here. Some good old tried and trues. I think most of you will recognize the spirea, but they flower in usually starting in May. Some of my personal favorites are actually working the edible gardening into our landscapes, right? So to use things like blueberries, that's what's back here. We can see the berries on them. But to use blueberries is a great way to attract pollinators when they flower in the springtime and also get some phenomenal fall color. These are going to turn anywhere from a beautiful, beautiful rust to a bright red. Just depends on variety. So awesome, awesome fall color. The other one that's really good for fall color is our native serviceberry. So these flower in April, and well, right now they're producing berries, and I gotta say the birds love them, so the birds are gonna strip them before the people even get them. And then we're gonna be anywhere from the orange to a red in the fall. One of the reasons we put this particular plant here is, again, it's going to help give us height and a sense of proportion when we're next to the wall. We talked about needing some warm season grasses on the other side of the courtyard. So I've got one here. This is a variety of switchgrass called North Wind. It's one of my personal favorites because this one turns anywhere from kind of yellows to oranges in the fall, and the whole thing looks like it glows. Now, the metal piece of this, the focal point, for those of you that are familiar with our garden center, you've seen this rock for a long time. For those of you that are familiar with our garden center from Woodlawn Road, where we spent the first 54 years of our life, this rock is actually one of the ones that my dad dug out of the parking lot when the original building was being built. So no, it is not for sale. It is really, it's part of my horticulture heritage. It's part of this site's horticulture heritage. But what we have done, and what we did a number of years ago, is we drilled, you can see it, we drilled a couple of holes through it. So there's one here, and there's one up there. So those holes are about 1.5 inches in diameter. There's a pump that sits underneath all this pebble. There's a basin that sits underneath all this pebble. And then the rock sits here. And this rock runs 365 days a year. In 7 years, it is not turned off. And it is beautiful. It is something that now that we've got the courtyard and more plantings, we see a lot more birds using this. So the birds are in and out of it all the time. They're getting used to the people again, which is awesome. The other thing that we see in the winter time is this has some beautiful, beautiful ice sculptures. So in terms of maintenance, when it's like this is what we call a bubbling rock or a pondless water feature, right? There's no water surface to it. So it drastically reduces the maintenance, which is fantastic. And in terms of maintenance, we literally do, and I'm not going to tell you this very loudly, we literally do nothing. Well, okay, it's a little bit more than nothing. Every couple of weeks we come out, we take a look at it, we might clean off a little bit of the algae. We make sure that the water's full, especially in the wintertime. You do need to come out and check these in the wintertime because when you've got the ice sculptures, you get a whole bunch of different splash, and you just want to make sure that reservoir is full of water. The other thing that we did is, again, 30% evergreen. So we looked at some creeping junipers, we've got grasses, and we also have a dwarf spruce tree. Spruce is not going to get very wide. It's really only meant to get 5 or 6 feet wide, and it'll get about 15 feet tall. And this was actually Dave's choice. Dave loves Christmas. So this little guy is going to be full of Christmas lights, and that gives us a little bit of impact from the road. So there's a whole ton of things in this courtyard. Again, we talked about blueberries, we talked about hydrangeas, we've got more hydrangeas, yay! We've got more color, which is super important. The other thing that's in here is a sentinel apple tree. So this little guy does actually, there it is, it does produce apples. There's an apple on the other side, really hard to see. There we go. We got it. So in time, we're going to get some apples off of this. Now the nice thing with our, well, okay, not so nice thing about planting fruit trees is sometimes we have disease and insect issues. So a lot of times you see those in the first couple of years as you start planting, and it's generally brought on by heat and humidity. So when we look at this particular apple tree, yes, we do see some spots, and I'm going to call this right out. We're going to be upfront and personal. We do see some spots. This is a fungal infection called rust. Given where we are in the season, so again, we're taping at the end of June. This year in 2024 has been unbelievably wet and unbelievably humid. It's also been very cool at night, except for the last couple of weeks. So that is one of the things that disease does actually appreciate. So we do treat this. We treat it absolutely organically, but most of the worst of the leaves, just like this one, we're going to pluck off, and the plant's going to build some strength and some resilience over time too. So to have a few spots on a leaf, not the end of the world, right? So we want to normalize having some spots on our leaves. We normalize having a full ecosystem, and when we've got a full healthy ecosystem, sometimes we don't necessarily have all the things that the people like, but the people need to get used to them. And I know from the retailer in me, that's a really weird statement. From the ecology, I can't even say that word. From the ecological point of view, we need to make sure, again, we've got a full ecosystem. As our ecosystem gets healthier and fuller, we're also going to see a natural reduction in disease and insects. So that's our little quick courtyard tour. There's still a few more things to go in here. We've got to get some seating. We've got a few other surprises. Once we get those done, we'll do another tour. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.